On a rainy evening, I had every intention of taking the subway that connects the bustling city to the quieter suburbs. This was a route I was quite familiar with, having traveled it many times before, but something in the air hinted that this journey would be unlike any I had experienced. As I stepped into the narrow tunnel, an eerie atmosphere seemed to wrap around me, almost like a thick fog, as if some unseen force was gently pulling me toward the unknown darkness that lay ahead. The train slowly approached my station, and I reached out to gently open the door. Inside, the carriage was mostly empty, with just a handful of passengers scattered about, each one glued to their phone screens, their headphones securely in place. Once I settled into my seat, my gaze was unexpectedly drawn to the darkness outside the window, where something flickered briefly, almost as if it were alive and moving. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that was creeping into my mind, forcing myself to relax. It felt as though my brain was caught in a bizarre loop. The more I thought about it, the more terrifying the situation became. Suddenly, without warning, the lights in the carriage flickered ominously, and a piercing screech of the brakes shattered the silence like glass breaking. The passengers looked around frantically, their faces filled with concern as they peered out the window, where the darkness seemed to close in on us, suffocating and oppressive. I felt a wave of panic wash over me and made the decision to get off the train to see what was happening. Just then, I caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure lurking outside the window, and my heart skipped a beat. The figure was indistinct and fuzzy, and in that moment of confusion, I could hardly believe my eyes. It was dressed in a long black cloak, its face obscured by shadow, making it impossible to discern any features. I don't know what compelled me, but an irresistible urge surged within me, leading me to open the door and step toward that mysterious figure. The moment I stepped out of the train, I was hit by a bone-chilling cold that wrapped around me like a shroud, as if I were slipping into another world entirely, one that was dark and foreboding. Through the light rain, I strained to get a clear look at the figure, but it flowed like smoke, vanishing before I could fully comprehend it. My curiosity began to outweigh my fear as I found myself following that indescribable presence into the depths of the tunnel. This tunnel was nothing like I had imagined. The walls were plastered with various grotesque graffiti, twisting and contorting under the dim, flickering light, creating an unsettling atmosphere that only heightened my anxiety. I began to examine the graffiti more closely, and I noticed that many of the patterns seemed to silently scream, conveying a sense of anger and despair that resonated deep within me. With each step I took, I felt increasingly uneasy, as if countless eyes were watching me from the shadows, not allowing me to escape their gaze. Just then, I heard hurried footsteps behind me, echoing through the tunnel, as if something were pursuing me. My heart raced, and I quickly turned around, but to my dismay, I saw nothing but the darkness. I took off running, my mind fixated on a single thought: I had to escape this bizarre and unsettling place. As I sprinted, I slammed against the walls, weaving through the swaying graffiti that seemed to come alive around me. Suddenly, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. There was an unknown presence lurking in the dark behind me, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. My heart pounded in my chest, almost to the point of suffocation, and the footsteps behind me grew ever closer, echoing ominously in the tunnel. With all my strength, I burst out of the tunnel, finally reaching the exit, but what welcomed me was an overwhelming silence that felt suffocating. The sights around me filled me with despair, and the city lights in the distance felt like a distant mirage, almost unreachable. I glanced around, desperately searching for somewhere to hide, only to find that it was all in vain. There was nowhere to escape to. Just when despair began to consume me completely, my eyes fell back on the tunnel entrance in the distance, where the shadow reappeared, seemingly waiting for me, as if it had been expecting my return. My body was inexplicably drawn back toward it, fear and curiosity intertwining in my heart, creating a tumultuous storm of emotions. I knew that stepping back into this tunnel would mean an end to any chance of escape, sealing my fate in the darkness. Memories surged in my mind, and those deep-seated fears that I had buried long ago were laid bare in that moment. The things I had tried so hard to forget came flooding back, overwhelming me with their intensity. Floating between dreams and reality, I could no longer tell which was real and which was just a figment of my imagination. This tunnel felt like my home, luring me into its dark abyss, and I no longer had the strength to resist its pull. Finally, I found myself standing at the end of that darkness, filled with a profound sense of helplessness and resignation. Was this an inescapable fate that had been predetermined for me, or was it a relentless pursuit of the unknown that I had unwittingly embarked upon? I didn't know. Perhaps this tunnel represented the deepest fears within me, lurking in the dark, waiting patiently to be uncovered someday. When I would finally confront the shadows that haunted me, hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was a sultry morning, thick with humidity, when I embarked on a journey that would haunt my memories for the entirety of my life. I had heard whispers of hope and opportunity waiting in the United States, a land where dreams could be woven into reality. Far removed from the despair that had gripped my homeland for so long. Little did I know that the path to that elusive future would lead me through the heart of one of the deadliest jungles on Earth, the Darien. A place where nature's ferocity was rivaled only by the darkness that lurked within the hearts of men. The thought of what lay ahead filled me with trepidation, yet the promise of a better life pushed me forward. As we gathered at the edge of the jungle, the atmosphere thrummed with palpable anxiety and tension. There were 15 of us, immigrants hailing from various corners of Central America, all united by a common desire to escape our dire circumstances and seek a new beginning. A man named Carlos, a seasoned guide who had traversed the jungle more times than he could count, stood before us. His presence both reassuring and alarming. His rugged face was lined with experience, and despite the authority in his voice, I could sense the tremor of fear lurking behind his words. "Stick together," he warned us, his eyes scanning the thick foliage. "The jungle takes everything from you, your strength, your resolve, sometimes even your life. Do not underestimate its power." With that ominous reminder, we entered the thick foliage, the towering trees casting eerie shadows as the sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy above. The air was hot and humid, with the persistent buzz of insects surrounding us like a menacing choir, their incessant droning filling the silence of the jungle. Hours drifted by, time losing its meaning as we trudged deeper into the abyss, each step feeling heavier than the last. We followed Carlos closely, our hearts heavy with foreboding, acutely aware that every step we took was leading us further from safety and deeper into danger. It was on the second day of our trek that the first shattering event unfolded, a moment that would forever be etched in my memory. We had reached a narrow clearing when a sudden rustle in the bushes sent ripples of panic through our group. Before we could fully process the sound, a group of men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by masks and their intentions clear as they brandished weapons with menacing authority. "Down!" Carlos shouted, but it was too late. The chaos erupted instantly, a whirlwind of terror that left us paralyzed in fear. Screams filled the air as the armed men lunged toward us, their movements swift and brutal. I remember seeing Juan, a wiry man who had shared dreams of a new life with me over a flickering campfire, tackled to the ground with terrifying force. I felt frozen, an onlooker to violence I had only heard about in distant stories. The men dragged him away, his desperate pleas echoing in the jungle, begging for them to stop, to let him go. He was not the last to disappear that day. Several others, too, were taken, lost in a haze of terror and brutality, swallowed by the very jungle that had promised us freedom. The remaining group, now a fragmented puzzle of fear and despair, stumbled through the jungle in shock, our minds racing with what had just transpired. Carlos, who had strived to be our anchor, could do nothing but urge us to keep moving, to put distance between ourselves and the horror that had just unfolded. But how could we? Each rustle in the underbrush felt like a shot of adrenaline coursing through our veins. Each shadow a stark reminder of what awaited us in this hellish expanse. The jungle had transformed from a place of hope into a living nightmare. Night fell, stretching the ambience into an even more terrifying realm. We huddled together, our whispers barely audible over the chorus of croaking frogs and chirping insects. Sleep was a foreign concept, our bodies exhausted but our minds racing with the horrific images that lingered in the dark corners of our thoughts. I could feel the weight of despair pressing down on my chest as I replayed the vivid scenes from earlier, unable to shake off the guilt of survival that gnawed at me. Why had I been spared while others had been taken? The following days turned into a blur of madness, our small group dwindling as more fell victim to the jungle's merciless hold. Each morning brought news of another loss, and with it, a deeper craving for survival against the gnawing sense of hopelessness that threatened to consume us. I lost track of time, the sun becoming an indifferent observer to our plight, its rays no longer a source of warmth, but a reminder of the days slipping away. On the fifth day, we stumbled into a dilapidated clearing, remnants of what appeared to be an old campsite. We dared to hope for safety, for a moment of respite. But our brief sense of relief was short-lived. That night, the jungle erupted into chaos once more. They came again, masked men. Their voices low and intimidating as they prowled through the darkness, searching for any sign of life. They were persistent, their hunger for power and control palpable in the air. In the confusion, I heard footsteps approaching my hiding place. My heart raced as I held my breath, praying fervently that they wouldn't find me, that I could remain hidden from their predatory gaze. In the dead of night, I witnessed horrors I had never imagined were possible. My heart sank with every anguished scream that pierced the quiet. Each cry a grim reminder that we were nothing more than prey to those who thrived on fear. I saw the faces of the people who had once shared laughter and hopes with me ripped away. One by one, swallowed by the jungle's insatiable hunger for despair and suffering. The jungle had become an abyss of terror, a living nightmare that threatened to consume us all. Between snatched moments of breath and trembling hands, I could feel my humanity slipping away. Desperation clawed at my insides as I fought to maintain my grip on sanity, clinging to the flicker of hope that still lay ahead. That somehow we could escape this nightmare. Despite the ever-present danger, the burning desire to escape kept me pushing forward, fueling my resolve to survive against all odds. It was on the seventh day that we, what remained of us, came across a small river. The water shimmered temptingly under the hazy light. A glimpse of freedom amidst the chaos. We waded through the cool water, desperate to wash away the stains of our ordeal, to cleanse ourselves of the horror we had witnessed. But the river held secrets, and as we emerged on the other side, I knew that danger lingered still, lurking just beyond our sight. The final stretch of our journey was nothing short of a nightmare. Malaria and hunger clawed at our bodies, weakening us further. But hope ignited our footsteps, propelling us forward. The specter of death loomed overhead, yet we managed to navigate through the relentless undergrowth. Each rustle inducing panic, each shadow a potential threat. We pressed on, driven by the faint glimmer of a future that felt just out of reach. And then, miraculously, we reached the border, a line in the sand that separated peril from promise. I remember collapsing on the ground, the weight of my fears finally breaking under the promise of safety that lay ahead. But the nightmare of the journey followed me. Shadows lurking in the corners of my mind, refusing to let go of their hold on me. As I crossed into the United States, I found myself in a world brimming with possibility, but the otherworldly horrors of the jungle clung to me like a second skin. a constant reminder of the price I had paid for freedom. Regret settled into my bones, intertwining with the memories of those lost in the depths of the Darien, their faces haunting me in my dreams. No victory felt more hollow than this. The price had been too high, and the cost of my survival weighed heavily on my conscience. Even now, I wake at night with the echoes of screams reverberating in my mind, the faces of my lost companions haunting my thoughts, their pleas for mercy echoing in the silence. Each day forward carries the burden of what I survived, but also what was taken from me in the process. The jungle taught me that hope is a fragile thing, easily swallowed by despair, and as I grapple with the memories, I know that some journeys leave scars that never heal, ones that stay embedded deep within the soul, forever marking the path I took in search of a new life. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As an experienced rescue diver, my life has always been intricately connected to water, particularly the vast and deep waters of the Great Lakes. These lakes, with their shimmering surfaces reflecting the sunlight, hide countless secrets beneath, secrets that have intrigued and captivated many. The underwater world is a realm filled with mystery and the unknown, and we are the brave souls who venture into these depths, seeking to uncover the enigmas that lie beneath. My partner, Michael, is not just a fellow diver. He is a legend in the diving community, known for his expertise and extensive knowledge of the underwater environment. He has always been my confidant, someone I trust implicitly. Michael constantly emphasizes the crucial importance of diving safety and the necessity of adhering to the established rules. He has taken the time to teach me how to survive and work effectively in complex underwater environments, how to remain calm in the face of emergencies, and how to handle unexpected situations. His wealth of experience has opened my eyes to the fact that diving is not merely a skill, it is an art form that requires finesse, intuition, and respect for the ocean's power. One sunny morning, with the sky clear and the sun shining brightly, we decided it was the perfect day to dive into Lake Superior, a place known for its legendary burial site of missing persons. Stories about this eerie location have circulated within the diving community for years, sending chills down the spines of many who have heard them. According to local lore, the lakebed is said to hide the remains of numerous missing individuals, their souls endlessly wandering in the water, waiting for someone brave enough to find them. While I was somewhat skeptical about these supernatural tales, Michael held a firm belief in them. He often said that the lake has a will of its own and possesses the ability to sense the hearts and intentions of divers who enter its depths. As we prepared our diving gear, I noticed the serious expression on Michael's face. He handed me an old amulet, explaining that it was a keepsake from his mother, and he hoped it would bring me good fortune during our dive. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a mix of unease and curiosity, but eventually hung it around my neck. Soon after, we took a deep breath and jumped into the lake, instantly feeling the cold, oppressive water envelop us like a heavy blanket. As we descended deeper into the lake, the light around us gradually faded, and the underwater world transformed into something increasingly strange and surreal. We swam through a dark area filled with tangled weeds and bizarre underwater creatures, each more peculiar than the last. In this silent world, the only sound I could hear was my heartbeat, which echoed in my ears, amplifying the inexplicable tension I felt in my chest. When we entered a narrow underwater cave, I sensed we were on the brink of discovering something truly unique. The cave walls were covered in thick, colorful algae, vibrant yet foreboding, hinting at some underlying danger. Michael led the way, his movements confident and steady, while I followed closely behind, trying to keep pace. Suddenly, I felt a chilling shiver run down my spine, as if an unseen presence was watching our every move, lurking just out of sight. Out of nowhere, Michael's flashlight flickered ominously, its beam illuminating a shadowy figure silently floating in the water ahead of us. My heart sank as a flood of terrifying thoughts rushed through my mind, each more horrifying than the last. But to my astonishment, Michael swam toward the creature without a moment's hesitation, his curiosity seemingly overpowering his caution. I tried to keep up with him, but an invisible force seemed to pull me back, preventing me from moving forward. Then, in an instant, the shadow moved, darting away at a speed much faster than we could swim. Its shape twisted and turned, gliding through the water with an agility that left me breathless. Michael let out a blood-curdling scream as the creature grabbed him tightly, and my heart nearly stopped as I watched him being dragged into the dark abyss. I struggled desperately to chase after him, my instincts screaming at me to save him, but I found I couldn't move, as if an irresistible force had me pinned in place, immobilized by fear and disbelief. In that harrowing moment, memories of diving with Michael flooded my mind, his teachings, the countless diving safety tips he had shared, and his profound love for the underwater world. A profound fear of loss washed over me, deeper and more consuming than any shadow lurking in the depths. I fought with all my might to break free from this mental and emotional constraint, and after a surge of determination, I finally shook off my paralyzing fear and began to swim upward, desperate to reach the surface. As I broke through the surface of the water, I gasped for fresh air, my heartbeat thundering in my ears like a war drum. My trembling hands fumbled with my diving gear, trying to contact the dive bays, but all I heard in my earpiece was static, a maddening reminder of my isolation. A wave of unprecedented loneliness and despair washed over me, threatening to drown me in its depths. Michael's dire situation made it impossible for me to calm my racing thoughts, but I knew I couldn't underestimate the abyss. I couldn't risk diving again out of fear for my own safety. I floated on the surface for what felt like an eternity, trying to clear my thoughts and make sense of what had just happened. But the haunting image of the shadow and Michael's capture lingered in my mind, refusing to fade away. Eventually, I made the difficult decision to return to shore and gather a team to help organize a rescue operation. I knew that facing the abyss could render our efforts futile, yet I felt compelled to try. A few hours later, our rescue team finally assembled and set out, ready to confront the unknown. When I returned to the dive site, it was already evening, and the lake shimmered with golden waves in the fading light of the sunset, everything looking deceptively calm and peaceful. Yet, my unease resurfaced, a sense of foreboding creeping back into my mind. The rescue team members began preparing at the lake's edge, and this time, I felt a renewed sense of determination coursing through me. The underwater world remained silent, but everything seemed to warn us of the dangers that lay ahead. Eventually, we reached that perilous cave, but to my dismay, Michael was still missing. My panic grew with each passing moment, as if some dark force from the seabed was drawing me in, beckoning me to join Michael in the depths. We searched frantically around the cave, but every shadow felt like a silent mockery, the painful reality of our situation echoing in my heart, amplifying my fear. Just when we were about to give up hope, I felt that shiver again, more intense than before. A familiar figure appeared in my mind, as if Michael was still by my side, encouraging me to keep going and not to give up. With that incredible feeling of connection, I closed my eyes and dove deeper into the darkness, searching for any trace he might have left behind, any sign that he was still alive. At the moment I was about to surrender to despair, my hand brushed against a cold object, and my heart raced with a mix of hope and dread. It was Michael's glove, and the surrounding water surged around me, almost as if it echoed his cries for help. My heart raced, and I sensed something ominous lurking in the depths. Was it him? I quickly reached for the glove, but an unseen force pulled me into the depths of the cave, dragging me down into the darkness. In that dark moment, I suddenly realized that the lake's secrets were far more complex and intertwined than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about the underwater objects and the bodies of the missing. It was also about the presence of that shadow lurking in the depths, a malevolent force that fed on our fears. Just like the currents at the lakebed, we had no idea what price we were paying for our adventure, what sacrifices we were making in our quest for answers. The silence of history and the secrets of the past intertwined at that moment, waiting to swallow us whole, to claim us as part of its dark narrative. Yet, a glimmer of hope remained in my heart, a flicker of light amid the encroaching darkness, as Michael's teachings flowed through my soul with every moment I spent diving. I knew that no matter how dark it got, the instinct to survive was unshakable, a primal force that would not be easily extinguished. So, I swam with all my might toward the surface, carrying an unfinished mission, determined to find Michael, and heading toward the light that promised safety and salvation. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. As I sit here, trembling and filled with an unease I can hardly describe, I cannot shake the haunting memories of my days as a deep-sea diver. The recollection of my decision to leave my position at the dive company weighs heavily on my mind. A choice made not out of mere preference, but born from a profound fear and an overwhelming sense of dread that clung to me like a second skin, suffocating and relentless. The ocean, it turns out, is not just a realm of beauty and wonder, it is also a lurking horror that waits patiently in the shadows beneath the waves, a place where nightmares dwell and reality blurs into something unrecognizable. My last few dives have morphed into indistinct memories of eerie silence, each moment interrupted by bizarre phenomena that defy explanation and logic. On one of those fateful expeditions, I was tasked with investigating a series of bizarre bubbling currents that had mystified our team for weeks. These currents emerged from the depths like the breath of some great beast, twisting and dancing in a way that seemed almost alive, leading us toward the unknown. Back then, I was fueled with the thrill of discovery, my adventurous spirit eager to see what the ocean concealed, to uncover its secrets and mysteries. Little did I know that what lay beneath was far more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. As I descended deeper into the cerulean abyss, my heart raced with anticipation, the excitement of the dive mingling with a growing sense of unease. The deeper I went, the more I sensed that something was fundamentally wrong, something sinister lurking just beyond the reach of my light. The beam from my diving lamp flickered erratically, as if in sync with the strange currents that surrounded me, and the water grew colder, almost biting at my skin as if it were alive. With each foot I sank downwards, the familiar hum of the ocean faded into nothingness, replaced by a deafening silence that echoed in my ears, a silence that felt heavy and oppressive, as if the very sea itself was holding its breath. It was on this dive that I first stumbled upon what would haunt me for the rest of my life, the sunken military aircraft. Half buried in the sand, with the ocean crusting it like a forgotten tomb, was a plane that had gone missing years prior, its wings spread out like broken arms in eternal surrender to the depths. I swam closer, the eeriness intensifying with every stroke, my heart pounding in my chest. My cheap thrills turned to dread. Was I witnessing the remnants of a tragedy, or had I stumbled upon a curse that no man should encounter? The very thought sent shivers down my spine, but curiosity propelled me forward. The cockpit was caked in corrosion, the glass fogged over with the brine of the ocean's tears, obscuring whatever lay within. As I peered inside, my stomach seized with horror. There, twisted and contorted in their seats, were not just skeletons, but shadows. They moved in a way that made me question my sanity, their forms shifting and writhing as if they were caught in a nightmare of their own. Perhaps it was my mind playing tricks on me. I hadn't seen anything in the depths beyond shadows cast by my equipment, yet I was overwhelmed by a certainty that they were watching me, their hollow eyes boring into my very soul. I didn't dare to linger any longer than necessary. My heart raced as I shot back to the surface, desperation fueling my ascent, each kick of my fins propelling me upward with urgency. What followed was a conspiracy of silence among my fellow divers, whispers and uneasy glances that spoke of shared dread now etched into our very souls. The blessings of camaraderie, which once felt like a source of strength, turned into something much darker. We were haunted by what we had seen, bonding over the silence that weighed heavily in our chests, a weight that felt like a stone, unyielding and cold. The next few dives were no better. Each excursion into the depths revealed new nightmares lurking just beyond the edge of our lights. The deep was scrawled with strange markings, cryptic symbols that sent a chill racing down my spine, igniting a primal fear that I could not shake. Something watched us from the shadows, a presence that felt both ancient and malevolent. My fellow divers began to speak in hushed tones of the specters that haunted the underwater realm, a twisting, slithering shape that could manipulate the sea itself, drawing unsuspecting souls into the abyss from which there was no return. It was during a recovery operation that the darkness fully enveloped us, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud. We were tasked with retrieving a submerged vessel that had gone down with all hands, a mission that filled me with dread. As we prepared for the dive, my stomach churned with anxiety, the fear gnawing at my insides. There were whispers of missing divers, of one particular man, a seasoned sailor, who had ventured down only to never return. The ocean was a mausoleum, and its secrets would rather be buried than shared with those who dared to disturb its slumber. As we descended, the water thickened, wrapping around us like a suffocating shroud, each kick of our fins feeling heavier as if the very sea was trying to hold us back. The further we plummeted, the more grotesque the landscape became, like the aftermath of a great deluge, but there was something alive in that stillness, an intelligence lurking just beyond the reach of our lights, watching and waiting. In the gloom, we found him, a survivor. Clinging to the wreckage, he was reminiscent of a lost soul from another time, his eyes wild with terror and loss, reflecting the horrors he had witnessed. We pulled him aboard our recovery vessel, but he wasn't free. The flickering lights cast strange shadows on his face, and he spoke in fragmented sentences, recounting stories of dark encounters that sent shivers down my spine. I listened, heart pounding, as he recounted his tale of an entity that had spoken to him in whispers, coaxing him into the depths, promising knowledge and power but yielding only madness and despair. The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, a palpable dread that seeped into our very bones. As he grappled with his reality, I caught glimpses of his past creeping into my dreams, faces of comrades lost beneath the waves, eyes wide in terror, their screams silenced by the crushing force of the ocean. The survivor's mind began to fray at the edges, revealing a deeper horror buried beneath the wreckage of his sanity. He muttered about things that moved in the darkness, ancient creatures that guarded the secrets of the abyss, their forms shifting and elusive, always just out of sight. With each passing day, whispers circulated among the crew, a growing sense of paranoia that wrapped around us like a vice. We spoke in hushed tones of the survivor's descent into madness, of unexplained phenomena that followed him like a shadow. Some claimed they saw shadows darting behind us when we sailed over sunken wrecks, strange figures that roamed the deep, watching, waiting, their intent inscrutable and terrifying. Fear seeped into our veins, a creeping dread that settled in our chests, and one fateful evening, against all better judgment, I gathered a few members of the crew and suggested we dive once more. We were resolute in our defiance of the creeping dread that had taken hold of us, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to confront the darkness that loomed over us. If we sought the secrets beneath the waves, perhaps we could gain closure for ourselves, a final truth that could explain the unseen forces at play, or at the very least, a chance to confront our fears head-on. That night, we descended into the dark, our lights flickering wildly as we reached the bottom, the darkness enveloping us like a shroud. But we pressed on, hearts racing with a mix of fear and thrill, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Suddenly, we spotted it, a colossal figure in the distance, undulating in the water, a grotesque form that seemed both alive and dead, a nightmarish vision that sent panic surging through the group. Before I could even shout a warning, chaos erupted around us. We were slipping into the turmoil of flailing limbs and desperate gasps for air. My heart thudded in my chest as I swam frantically, desperately trying to escape the unseen grip that threatened to drag me into the void. It was as if the ocean itself conspired against us, currents swirling around us like serpents while that monstrous figure loomed ever closer, a harbinger of doom. I turned to see my fellow divers tumbling into the darkness, their lights extinguished one by one, swallowed by the abyss, their screams muffled by the crushing weight of the water. The last thing I remember is the survivor's face, haunted, pleading, his eyes wide with terror as he was consumed by shadows, dragged into the depths as if the sea itself had claimed him. And then there was silence, a profound and chilling silence that enveloped me. I don't know how I made it back to the surface. I was a mere shell of my former self, gasping for breath as salty waves crashed against me, each wave a reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. I felt the pull of the abyss behind me, a dark whisper that beckoned me to return, and in that moment of clarity, I vowed never to return to the deep. The ocean was not a friend, it was a merciless beast, harboring secrets best left undisturbed, a realm of nightmares that no man should ever seek to explore. As I pen these words, I am plagued by memories that refuse to fade, a relentless tide of recollections that crash against the shores of my mind. The nightmares return, even in daylight, shadows that dance at the edge of my vision, flickering just out of reach, an echo of whispers I can never quite catch, haunting me with their promise of darkness. I fear for the others who brave the depths, who think the ocean offers solace and adventure, unaware of the truth that lurks beneath the surface, the unholy pact that lingers in those forgotten currents, the lurking specter that waits, patient and hungry, for the next soul to ensnare. I walk away from the ocean today with a scar etched deep within, a haunting reminder of the abyss that beckons, a power that remains as inscrutable as the unfathomable depths of the sea. And I know, if I ever dare to look back, I will see it waiting for me, a dark silhouette against the horizon. The ocean remembers, and it will not forget. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In the small, unassuming town where I reside, rumors have always been peculiar and enigmatic. Lately, an unusual phenomenon has taken root, captivating the townsfolk and igniting their imaginations. Each night, in the desolate square at the heart of the town, the atmosphere seems to shimmer with the essence of a film being projected, even though there is no visible screen or projector in sight. The most bizarre aspect of this occurrence is the complete absence of any staff or equipment. The townspeople have dubbed it the Shadow Movie. The film, intriguingly titled Nightmare from Mars, is said to be haunted by the restless spirit of its late producer, Victor Hudson, whose legacy seems to linger in the air. Initially, I paid little heed to these whispers and tales. I merely listened as my neighbors animatedly discussed the haunting images they had witnessed during their evening gatherings, sharing spine-chilling stories of the terrifying creatures and ghostly landscapes that appeared on the invisible screen. Their accounts piqued my curiosity, but as the conversations intensified, my initial intrigue morphed into an overwhelming desire to experience this shadowy film for myself, to uncover the secrets it held. One fateful night, driven by an insatiable curiosity, I resolved to venture into the square. As I approached, the air grew thick with an odd, almost surreal atmosphere, as if I were ensnared in a dream that I could not escape. It was a feeling that defied description, a sense that something unspoken was drawing me closer. I quietly found a secluded corner to sit and waited with bated breath for the fantastical show to commence. As darkness enveloped the square, everything around me fell into an eerie silence. Suddenly, an invisible light sliced through the surrounding darkness, and the movie began to unfold. Ethereal images materialized in the air, haunting scenes of Mars's crimson dunes, bizarre creatures skirting along the edges of the shadows, seemingly in search of something elusive. A wave of unease washed over me, settling deep within my gut, until a voice shattered the silence, sounding eerily like Victor's ghost whispering through the night. "You will become a part of me too." Though the words were cryptic, They sent icy chills racing down my spine, leaving me feeling unsettled. After the film concluded, I hastily departed from the square, but the oppressive feeling lingered, haunting my thoughts long after I had left. Days turned into weeks, and I began to notice an increasing number of peculiar happenings in the town. Whispers of another case began to circulate, involving an abandoned house that had become the center of attention. Several police officers had reported hearing strange, unearthly screams during their investigation, yet they could never pinpoint the source. This house had always been regarded as a forbidden zone in our town. I had heard the ominous rumors before, but now they took on a chilling significance that I could not ignore. One particularly dark and moonless night, I made the decision to explore the abandoned house for myself. It loomed at the edge of town like a dark star, one that had never basked in the warmth of sunlight. Vines twisted and curled around the door, concealing countless secrets within its depths. As I pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoed ominously, serving as a silent warning against what lay ahead. Inside, the scene was one of utter desolation, as if the place had been forsaken for a century, and the air was thick with a strange, musty odor that made my stomach churn. As I ventured deeper into the house, my heart raced with a mix of fear and anticipation. Suddenly, a sharp, blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness, emanating from somewhere below. I hesitated for a fleeting moment, my instincts urging me to turn back, but curiosity propelled me forward. I cautiously descended the steep, rickety stairs, my flashlight illuminating the walls that were covered in unsettling graffiti and dark crimson stains. What I discovered next left me utterly horrified. In the dimly lit basement lay several bodies, the remains of homeless individuals who appeared to have been trapped in this hellish place. Their faces were frozen in expressions of despair and terror, and beside them stood a grotesque piece of experimental equipment. It was a nightmarish contraption, constructed from rusty steel and broken pipes, evoking images of a twisted laboratory. I could almost hear faint whispers brushing against my ears, as if the spirits of the lost were accusing me. The fate of these innocents was somehow intertwined with my own. Upon returning to town, I found it increasingly difficult to shake off those horrifying images that had burned themselves into my memory. Meanwhile, reports of missing homeless individuals began to surface, and hardly anyone seemed to know where they had vanished. Even more unsettling was the rumor that began to circulate about a clown. This clown had become synonymous with the disappearances, and chilling tales emerged, suggesting that he was conducting horrific experiments, seemingly using the homeless as his unwilling subjects. The very thought of it sent a shiver down my spine. I could no longer live in quiet denial. I felt compelled to investigate this enigmatic clown myself. During my search, I stumbled upon a dark alley that appeared to have a complex connection to the clown's existence. Following the shadowy path, I discovered an abandoned laboratory, its entrance shrouded in darkness. As I stepped inside, the acrid smell of chemicals assaulted my senses, and I was immediately reminded of the bodies I had seen, a wave of nausea washing over me. In the dim light of the laboratory, I noticed an open notebook lying on a dusty table. It contained records detailing bizarre experiments and anatomical drawings, along with the chilling name, the Clown of Rebirth. My heart raced as I felt the pieces of a sinister puzzle falling into place. This clown must be inextricably linked to Victor's movie and the growing list of missing homeless individuals. Just as I was engulfed in a whirlwind of fear and disbelief, I heard a low, sinister laugh emanating from behind me. I spun around in a panic to find a raggedly dressed clown standing before me, his face contorted and grotesque beneath the mask, as if I were trapped in a waking nightmare from which I could not escape. "The clown will always bring you joy and fear," he whispered, his voice echoing like a ghostly wail in my ears. I fled the horrifying scene in a blind panic, but that laughter followed me, lingering in the air, mocking my helplessness and despair. As I stumbled away, I felt myself slipping into an endless abyss of darkness. The weight of my experiences became increasingly unbearable. It felt as though the town was cloaked in some malevolent force, a darkness that seeped into every corner of my mind. I began to doubt my sanity, feeling as though I were ensnared in an inescapable fate that I could not comprehend. Ultimately, I resolved to delve into the sewers, where rumors suggested the clown made his lair. Perhaps there, hidden beneath the surface, I could uncover the truth that had eluded me for so long. As I navigated the dark, damp passages, searching and probing for answers, the air was thick with hushed whispers, the clown's whispers, Victor's ghostly whispers. They echoed in my ears, growing louder and more insistent, pushing me deeper into a pit of fear. Just as I felt I might lose consciousness, a soft light caught my eye. It was gentle and radiant, a glimmer of hope amidst the overwhelming despair. I rushed toward the light, only to discover that the laboratory had been rebuilt. This structure was unlike any other in town, glowing with an otherworldly light that seemed to beckon me closer. I stepped inside, my heart pounding, and saw a brand new projector, displaying the very nightmare from Mars I had witnessed in the square. This time, however, words began to materialize on the screen, embrace the cycle, become a part of it. An invisible terror enveloped me, and I realized I had finally uncovered the dark secret that lay hidden within the town. I turned to flee, but there was no sound behind me. I understood that I might not be the only soul trapped in this nightmarish reality, yet I could not grasp the full implications of what it all meant. In this town, the disappearances of the homeless, the legend of the clown, and Victor's ghost, all the horrors had found a home within this twisted experiment. I could no longer escape the vortex of despair. The helplessness and hopelessness that filled my heart would imprison me forever. Now, I wander endlessly through this darkness, becoming a lost clown, a mere shadow of my former self. The shadow movie will play on eternally, and I will be the final act in this chilling story, forever trapped in a cycle of fear and despair. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away.
As a forest ranger in Ohio, I've spent countless nights beneath the vast, star-speckled sky, surrounded by the towering trees of our national parks. Each rustle of leaves and distant animal call becomes a familiar companion in the solitude of the woods. Yet, there's a story that lingers in my mind, a chilling tale that has haunted me since childhood, the story of the Bell Lady. This tale is woven into the very fabric of the forest, a reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden within the shadows. When I was a child, my friends and I would often venture into the woods after dark, daring each other to explore deeper into the forest. The thrill of adventure fueled our courage, and we would challenge one another to push the boundaries of our fears. One particularly fateful night, emboldened by the excitement of the unknown, we decided to embark on a night hike, armed with nothing but flashlights and our youthful bravado. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape, while the air was thick with the intoxicating scent of pine and damp earth, creating an atmosphere that felt both magical and foreboding. As we wandered further from the well-trodden trail, our laughter echoed through the trees, but soon it faded into an eerie silence that enveloped us like a shroud. It was then that I first heard it, a soft, melodic ringing, like the delicate chime of a distant bell, floating through the stillness of the night. My heart raced, and I turned to my friends, but their faces were pale, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "Did you hear that?" one of them whispered, his voice barely audible over the growing tension. We stood frozen in place, the ringing growing louder, more insistent, pulling us in like a siren's call that promised safety and warmth. "Let's follow it," I suggested, my curiosity overriding the instinctual fear that clawed at my mind. We moved cautiously, the enchanting sound guiding us through the dark, twisting paths of the forest, each step echoing our trepidation and excitement. After what felt like hours of navigating the dense underbrush, we stumbled upon a small clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood an old, gnarled tree, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. Beneath it sat a figure draped in a flowing blue dress, her long hair cascading over her shoulders like a dark waterfall. The bell lady. Her face was obscured by shadows, but the sound of her bell was unmistakable, a haunting melody that resonated deep within my soul. "Come closer," she beckoned, her voice sweet yet haunting, wrapping around us like a cold breeze. We hesitated, fear gripping our hearts, but the allure of her presence was too strong to resist. As we approached, the bell chimed again, and I felt an overwhelming sense of calm wash over me, as if all my worries were being swept away. "Where are you lost children?" she asked, her tone soothing, almost maternal. We stammered our way through an explanation, our voices trembling with uncertainty, and she smiled, revealing a glimpse of teeth that gleamed like polished ivory, sharp and unsettling. "Follow my bell, and I will guide you home," she promised, her words wrapping around us like a silken thread. With that, she stood and began to walk, the bell ringing softly with each step she took. We followed, entranced, as if under a spell, until the forest began to shift around us. The trees seemed to close in, the shadows deepening, and I felt a chill run down my spine, a warning that something was terribly wrong. "Wait!" I called out, but my voice was swallowed by the darkness, leaving me feeling lost and abandoned. Suddenly, the ringing stopped, and the bell lady vanished before our eyes. Panic surged through us as we realized we were lost once more, the familiar path replaced by an oppressive silence. We called her name, desperation creeping into our voices, but only silence answered back, mocking our fear. Hours passed, and the weight of despair settled in, heavy and suffocating. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard it again, the bell, faint but unmistakable, like a distant lifeline. With renewed determination, we followed the sound, and miraculously, it led us back to the trail. Gasping for breath, we emerged into the moonlight, the familiar path stretching before us like a beacon of safety. We never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the bell lady lingered, a haunting melody in the back of my mind, echoing through the years. As the years went by, I became a ranger, dedicating my life to protecting the very woods that had once scared me. I patrolled the trails, ensuring the safety of visitors while also keeping an eye out for the signs of the bell lady. The story of the bell lady transformed over time, morphing into a local legend that captivated the imaginations of those who heard it. Tourists would come, eager to hear the tale, and I would recount it with a mix of nostalgia and caution, my heart heavy with the knowledge of its darker truths. But as the years passed, the bell lady became more of a mascot than a warning. Her image adorned brochures, and her story was sanitized for the public, stripped of its chilling essence. Yet, I knew the truth: the bell lady was not a comforting figure. She was a guardian of the lost, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the woods, waiting to ensnare the unwary. One fateful autumn evening, I received a call about a missing hiker, a woman named Anya. The urgency in the voice on the other end sent a chill down my spine. The search party was formed, and we combed through the forest, calling her name into the oppressive silence that seemed to swallow our voices whole. As night fell and the shadows deepened, I felt an unsettling familiarity, a sense of déjà vu that sent chills down my spine, as if the forest itself was conspiring against us. We searched for hours, but the woods remained unyielding, a labyrinth of darkness that concealed its secrets. Just as despair threatened to take hold, I heard it, the soft chime of a bell, echoing through the trees, a sound that resonated with a haunting familiarity. My heart raced as I followed this sound, my instincts guiding me deeper into the forest, urging me to uncover the truth that lay hidden within the shadows. The ringing grew louder, and I felt an inexplicable pull, as if the bell lady herself was beckoning me, drawing me into her web. I pushed through the underbrush, my breath coming in ragged gasps, each step heavy with the weight of dread. Suddenly, I found myself in the same clearing from my childhood, the gnarled tree standing sentinel, a ghost from the past that loomed over me. And there, beneath its branches, I saw her, Anya, sitting with her back to me, her hair cascading like a dark waterfall, a tragic figure lost in despair. "Anya!" I shouted, rushing forward, desperation clawing at my throat. But as I approached, the bell rang one last time, and she turned to face me, her eyes wide with terror, reflecting the darkness that surrounded us. "She's here," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "The bell lady. She won't let me go." In that moment, I understood the truth. The bell lady was not a benevolent spirit. She thrived on the lost, on those who wandered too far into her domain, feeding off their fear and despair. I felt a cold dread settle in my chest as I realized that Anya was not simply lost. She was claimed, ensnared by the very darkness we had been warned about. The bell rang again, and the shadows shifted around us, swirling like a tempest. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Anya's hand, our fingers intertwining as we tore through the forest, the sound of the bell ringing in our ears, a haunting melody that threatened to pull us back into the abyss. We ran until our lungs burned, until the trees began to thin and the moonlight broke through, illuminating our path. Just as we reached the edge of the woods, the ringing stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. We stumbled into the clearing, gasping for breath, and turned to look back, our hearts pounding in our chests. The bell lady stood at the edge of the trees, her figure shrouded in darkness, a silent sentinel watching us, her presence heavy with unspoken promises. "You escaped this time," she seemed to say, her gaze piercing through the night, a reminder of the dangers that lurked just beyond the light. That night changed everything for Anya and me. We returned to civilization, forever marked by our encounter with the bell lady. We shared our story, but it was met with skepticism and disbelief, dismissed as mere folklore. To most, it was just a tale, a ghost story to tell around the campfire, a thrill to entertain the curious. But to us, it was a warning, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the light, waiting for the next unwary soul to wander too far. As I continue my work as a ranger, I often think of that night and the bell lady, her presence forever etched in my memory. I've learned to respect the woods, to tread carefully in places where shadows linger and the air feels thick with unspoken dread. And though the tourists come and go, eager for a glimpse of the legend, I know the truth. The bell lady is not a tale to be told lightly. She is a guardian of the lost, a haunting melody that echoes through the trees, waiting patiently for the next unwary soul to wander too far into her embrace, forever entwined in her chilling grasp. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Every night at precisely 3:03, a haunting whistle reverberates through our quiet neighborhood, slicing through the silence like a knife. It's a peculiar sound, neither melodious nor harsh, but it resonates with an uncanny familiarity that sends shivers down my spine. As a child, I remember my parents' stern warnings: never look for the source of the whistle. It brings misfortune. I never truly understood what they meant back then. After all, isn't curiosity a natural part of growing up? But as I grew older, I learned to heed their words, especially when my younger sister, Nora, began to thrive. Nora was diagnosed with a rare illness when she was just a toddler, her small body battling relentless fevers and exhaustion that left her bedridden for days. My parents prayed fervently for her recovery, yet every remedy we tried seemed futile. But then, miraculously, after a few of those eerie whistles echoed through the night, Nora's health began to improve. It was as if an unseen force had breathed life back into her, allowing her to frolic and laugh once again. I often found myself in awe, wondering if there could be a connection between the whistle and her sudden resurgence. Venturing outside during those late hours was a forbidden act in our home. My parents spoke in hushed tones about how the whistle was both a blessing and a curse. Those who sought to uncover its origin were said to be enveloped in tragedy, a dark cloud shadowing their every step. The stories spread like wildfire among the neighbors. Glimpses of the figures supposedly responsible haunted our imaginations. Many swore they witnessed a shadowy silhouette in the moonlight, whistling under the light of the stars, yet no one dared to approach. Then came the Altons, our new neighbors. The day they moved in was marked by an unusual silence. I watched as they unpacked their boxes in the front yard, blissfully ignorant of the rumors that swirled around our community. Mr. Halton, a tall man with an air of arrogance, struck up conversations with the other neighbors about the whistle as if it were merely an interesting anecdote. I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened, concerned that his blatant curiosity would awaken something sinister. Despite my fears, it wasn't long before the whispers grew into idle chatter. Mr. Halton's obsession with uncovering the truth attracted the attention of the neighborhood, and soon, discussions about the whistle became a nightly ritual. I watched from the shadows as he quizzed my parents and other families, his relentless pursuit wearing on the nerves of those who had long accepted the unknown. Even Nora, whose health had continuously flourished since the onset of the whistle, started to look uneasy whenever she heard his name. I'll never forget the night it all changed, the night Mr. Halton's foolishness breached the unspoken pact of our neighborhood. It began with the familiar tune drifting through the darkness, weaving its way into our consciousness at 3:03. Nora, blissfully unaware of the havoc that was about to unfold, sat on our porch, her laughter dancing on the wind. Suddenly, we heard a commotion from the Haltons' yard. What was that? I gasped, straining to catch a glimpse of the shadow darting across their lawn. Mr. Halton had snuck out, lured by the enticing melody that beckoned him closer. Ignoring the warnings that echoed in my mind, I watched as he crept toward the source of the whistle, his figure swallowed by the night. A handful of moments passed, but it felt eternal. My heart raced, a mix of fear and morbid curiosity driving me to the edge of the porch. I wanted to call out to him but felt paralyzed, the warnings of my parents flooding my mind. Yet the moment I opened my mouth, the whistle abruptly ceased, replaced by an ominous silence that sent an electric pulse through the air. Deep down, I knew something was profoundly wrong. The world around me felt stifled, the usual sounds of the night vanishing as if they, too, were afraid. Just then, Mr. Halton reappeared, his face pale and devoid of expression, eyes wide as if he had just seen the very embodiment of fear. He stumbled backward, crashing into the bushes, and for a moment, I thought he might laugh it off, a comedy of errors. But the look in his eyes told a different story. He was intransigent, shaking his head and mumbling incoherently. It's real, he stammered, barely able to control the trembling of his hands. I felt an icy tendril of dread weave its way around my heart as he locked eyes with me, his expression reflecting the terror we all shared in our silence. From that night on, a shadow loomed over our neighborhood, a darkness that seemed to seep into the very walls of our homes. Whispers of misfortune began to surface, stories of neighbors who had come too close to the entity behind the whistle. I watched as families fell into despair, the laughter of children replaced with the stony silence of grief. Just a few doors down, Mrs. Fisher lost her beloved pet, a dog that she had cherished for over a decade. I could only imagine how it must have felt, seeing the shadows deepen in her once warm home. Worse yet, Nora grew increasingly agitated. The very sound that had once brought her joy now seemed to gnaw at her spirit, the symbols of support overshadowed by the encroaching sense of doom. I spent hours trying to reassure her, telling her the whistle was nothing to fear. Yet, every night at 3:03, I could see the fear crawl back into her eyes. Then it happened. Nora called for me one fateful night, her voice trembling as the familiar tune rang out through our open window. "Sophie, come here." Her plea echoed in my mind. I rushed into her room, only to find her standing by the window, staring into the night with a wild look that struck terror into my heart. "Nora, don't. You can't look," I cried, pulling her away. There was a tug-of-war within me, one part wanting to shield her from that dreadful sight, the other yearning to know what was lurking just beyond our view. But I couldn't allow her to risk it. As I wrapped my arms around her, I could feel her shaking, her tiny form trembling against my side. The whistle had become a vengeful spirit, feeding off the very essence of my sister. With every note that drifted through the air, I felt her health waver, every echo erasing the strength she had conquered so fiercely. I knew I had to do something, anything, to protect her from the darkness that loomed just beyond our reach. Despite my fear, I decided to confront Mr. Halton, who had become more of a recluse in the following weeks. His eyes were sunken in, haunted by visions that danced just behind his eyelids. I knocked timidly, fear swirling in my stomach as the door creaked open to reveal his disheveled appearance. "I need to talk to you," I whispered, my voice barely louder than a breath. About the whistle, he interrupted, the sharp edge of his tone foreboding. "You all should have listened. I shouldn't have looked." His features reflected an anguish that mirrored my own fears, and I took a deep breath, urging myself to remain composed. "Can we stop this?" I pleaded, desperation lacing my words. "The neighborhood is falling apart." "Nora," my voice faltered as I thought of my fragile sister, a silhouette against the darkness closing in on our lives. Mr. Halton's gaze shifted, a mix of guilt and terror etched on his face. "You can't stop it. Once you know, it's too late." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "The whistle grants blessings, but it demands a payment, a sacrifice for every favor it bestows." The room filled with a deafening silence, the weight of his words pressing heavy against my chest. Bewilderment gripped my heart as I considered the implications, the good luck that had come to our family and the increasingly ominous toll it exacted on those around us. Tears streamed down my face as I thought of Nora's laughter being swallowed by the darkness. "What do we do?" I choked out, the reality crashing down on me. "The only way to end it," he hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. "You have to confront it, face it head on. But if you look, if you see it, you might not come back." His words hung in the air, a chilling testament to the horrors that lay ahead. Desperation clawed at me as I realized the true weight of our family's fate. We had been blessed, but someone else had to pay the price. I had always thought I could protect Nora, but the tension in the air told me otherwise. As dread settled in my bones, an idea took root in my mind. Perhaps I was the only one left who could confront the malevolence behind the whistle. That fateful evening, as the clock ticked toward 3:03, I stood in my room, heart pounding, ready to confront whatever awaited me in the darkness. I gathered my courage, the thought of saving Nora fueling my determination. I wrapped my arms around myself, feeling the chill of fear seep into my skin. When the whistle sounded, it flowed through the air like treacle, wrapping around my mind and urging me to seek its source. I bolted out of the front door, feet pounding rhythmically against the pavement, heart racing with each echo reverberating in the depths of my soul. I followed the melody into the darkened street, each step urging me to turn back, yet I pressed on. The air thickened with tension, the weight of the night pressing down on my shoulders as I approached the clearing where the whistle seemed to originate. And there it was, a figure cloaked in shadows, merging with the fabric of darkness. I could barely make out its features, but its presence was palpable, a cold wind swirling around it as it stared back at me with eyes that pierced through the veil of night. My breath caught in my throat, fear coiling around my heart as the whistle taunted me, echoing through the stillness. In that moment, I felt the weight of every neighborhood tragedy weighing down upon me. I needed to confront this darkness, to unravel its hold on our lives. With trembling hands, I stepped closer, my voice barely louder than a whisper. "Who are you?" The figure tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that sent chills racing down my spine. "I am the keeper," it croaked, each word dripping with malevolence. "I offer luck, but luck has its price. What do you want?" I cried, panic rising within me as I struggled to comprehend the reality before me. It raised a hand, and suddenly, memories flooded my mind, every heartbreaking event, every lost pet, every shattered family. The sheer weight of sorrow twisted my heart, and I crumpled to my knees, understanding too late the toll that had been exacted. "What do I have to give?" I whimpered, despair coursing through my veins. The figure's eyes gleamed in the darkness, and its voice poured over me like ice water. "Your willingness to see the truth." In that moment, I was confronted by a powerful urge to look. Everything within me screamed to turn away, yet I felt a strange pull compelling me forward. "No!" I gasped, blindly grasping the memories I had unleashed. I wouldn't let Nora pay the price. I couldn't bear the thought of her losing the sparkle in her eyes. but the figure had already sensed my resolve. "It is not your sister I seek, she is but a pawn in the bigger game." It took a step forward, shadow blending with the darkness around us. "You will see, but the truth will come at a cost." Suddenly, the music shifted, a slow, mournful tune that resonated within my very soul. It called out memories, visions flashing before my eyes, a tapestry woven of blessings and terror, every thread intricately entwined. I felt the weight pressing in, sensations of joy and pain all entwining until I could no longer distinguish the two. I gasped, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "Stop!" I screamed, though deep within, I understood the futility of my protest. The darkness pulled tighter around me, blurring the lines between reality and nightmares. And then, the truth unfolded. I saw the faces of my neighbors twisted in anguish, their lives dismantled by the curse of the whistle. Each blessing had come with a sacrifice. The joy Nora had experienced had woven its roots deep into our family members' misfortunes. "You will choose," the figure hissed, a cruel smile revealing shadows behind it. "Save her or save yourself. But know this, your choice will determine the fate of many." In that moment, clarity washed over me. I understood the weight of my decision, the magnitude of sacrifice looming ahead. I thought of Nora's laughter, the joy she had brought into our lives, and I felt a deep yearning to shield her, no matter the cost to myself. As the whistle's tune crescendoed, I whispered the words that would seal my fate. "Let me be the sacrifice." A shudder coursed through the air, a ripple of energy surrounding me as the figure drew closer, a fusion of shadow and ancient power. It reached out with its cold fingers, and with a single touch, everything came crashing down. In an instant, I was enveloped by darkness, the world around me retreating until I was no longer anchored to reality. Just as suddenly, I found myself standing in an endless void, surrounded by echoes of laughter that transformed into ghostly whispers. I could feel their peace cascading into my existence, a brightness slowly creeping in. And then, I felt it, the warmth of sunlight flooding through the cracks of despair. I opened my eyes to find myself once more in our neighborhood, yet everything felt starkly different. The laughter had returned, the sounds of children playing rang through the air once again. My heart pounded as I turned on my heels and rushed back home. Nora was there, unscathed and laughing with her friends, unaware of the darkness that had nearly consumed us. Tears streamed down my face as I watched her, the weight of the sacrifice pressing against my chest. Somehow, my choice had brought back the light. The whistle's echo faded into the distance, a ghostly reminder of the pact I had made. The burden of the neighborhood's misfortunes lingered in the air, but for now, we were free, at least until the whistle called again. As I looked at my family nestled comfortably in the warmth of our home, I knew the horrors of that night would never truly disappear. With each echo of the whistle, the memories might return, shadowing our lives once more. I had chosen to confront the malevolence and endure its cost, but I also realized those who seek out the truth always pay the price. My heart raced as I made my way back to the room where I had confronted the darkness, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the echoes of the past would always remain close behind, haunting our memories, whispering through the nights of endless silence. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. From a young age, I found myself inexplicably drawn to the unusual, the eerie, and the unexplained. There was something captivating about the darker aspects of life, the stories that sent shivers down one's spine. So, when I stumbled upon the old house on Willow Street, I felt an inexplicable pull toward it, as if it were calling my name. The peeling paint, the sagging roof, and the overgrown garden whispered stories of the past, and I was determined to uncover them, eager to unravel the mysteries that lay within those walls. Little did I know, the house had its own secrets, and they were far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. Upon moving in, I was immediately greeted by the unsettling atmosphere that enveloped the place like a heavy fog. The neighbors were tight-lipped, casting furtive glances my way as I unloaded my belongings from the moving truck. Their silence spoke volumes, and I tried to engage them in conversation, hoping to glean some insight into the history of the house I now called home. However, they quickly turned away, leaving me feeling like an outsider in this strange little community. The only thing I managed to gather was that the house had a reputation, a dark one that sent chills down the spines of those who dared to speak of it. People spoke in hushed tones about the tragedies that had befallen its previous inhabitants, but I brushed it off as mere superstition, convinced that I was immune to whatever darkness lurked within. As the days turned into weeks, I began to experience a series of odd occurrences that I could no longer dismiss. It started subtly. I would find my belongings misplaced, as if someone had been rummaging through my things while I wasn't looking. At first, I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness, a simple case of misplacing my keys or leaving my coffee mug in the wrong room. But then, the curtains in the living room began to twitch, even when there was no breeze to disturb them. I would hear soft whispers at night, just beyond the walls, but when I tried to listen closely, they would fade away, leaving an unsettling silence in their wake that echoed in my mind long after. One particularly eerie evening, while I was unpacking a box in the attic, I discovered an old journal buried beneath a pile of dusty books. The leather cover was cracked, and the pages were yellowed with age, each one fragile and delicate. As I flipped through it, I realized it belonged to a woman named Margaret, who had lived in the house decades ago. Her entries were filled with despair, detailing her slow descent into madness. She wrote about shadows that lurked in the corners of her vision, always watching her every move, and voices that called her name in the dead of night, beckoning her to join them in their torment. The more I read, the more I felt a chill creep down my spine, as if her anguish seeped through the pages, wrapping around me like a cold embrace that left me shivering. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now alone in the house, that something was watching me from the shadows. I started to hear footsteps echoing in the hallways when I knew I was the only one there. The air grew thick with a sense of dread, and I began to avoid certain rooms, particularly the attic and the basement, where the darkness seemed to linger longer, as if it had taken up residence. I would often wake in the middle of the night to the sound of scratching, as if something was trying to claw its way out from within the walls, desperate to escape the confines of its prison. Determined to confront whatever was haunting me, I decided to investigate the basement one stormy night. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and making the old house creak ominously. The flickering light bulb cast eerie shadows on the damp walls, creating an atmosphere that felt charged with a sense of foreboding. As I descended the creaking stairs, I felt a heavy weight in the air, pressing down on me like a physical force. The darkness was suffocating, and I could barely see my hand in front of my face. I fumbled for the light switch, and when the bulb finally flickered to life, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The walls were covered in strange markings, symbols I couldn't decipher, etched into the surface as if by a restless hand. In the center of the room stood an old, rusted mirror, its surface clouded with grime and dust. As I approached it, I felt a strange compulsion to look into it, an irresistible urge that tugged at my very soul. When I did, I was not greeted by my own reflection but by a twisted visage of a woman, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow that seemed to reach out to me from the depths of the glass. She reached out to me, her lips moving in silent desperation, and I stumbled back, horrified, realizing in that moment that the house was a vessel for something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. I ran back upstairs, my heart racing in my chest as fear coursed through my veins. The whispers grew louder, echoing in my mind as I tried to piece together the fragments of Margaret's story, desperate to understand what had happened in this cursed place. It became clear that her spirit was trapped within the house, tormented by whatever darkness resided there, unable to find peace. I felt a deep sense of empathy for her, but I also knew I had to escape before it consumed me too, before I became just another victim of the malevolent force that lurked in the shadows. As the days passed, the haunting escalated to a terrifying degree. I began to see shadows flitting across the walls, darting just out of the corner of my eye, and the whispers turned into anguished cries that echoed through the halls. I could no longer sleep, plagued by nightmares of the woman in the mirror and the horrors that had unfolded in the house long before I had arrived. I reached out to the neighbors, hoping to find someone who could help me understand what was happening, but their eyes filled with pity, and they warned me to leave before it was too late, their voices trembling with fear as they recounted the stories of those who had come before me. One night, as I sat huddled in the living room, wrapped in a blanket for comfort, I felt an icy breeze wash over me, sending chills down my spine, and the lights flickered ominously overhead. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread, and I knew I had to confront the spirit that haunted me, to face the darkness that threatened to envelop me. I gathered my courage and made my way back to the basement, armed with a flashlight and a journal, determined to find a way to free Margaret's spirit and, in turn, free myself from the horrors of this place. The moment I stepped into the room, I felt the temperature drop sharply, and the shadows seemed to close in around me, suffocating and oppressive. I began to read aloud from Margaret's journal, hoping to reach her, to offer her the solace she had been denied for so long. As I spoke, I felt a presence grow stronger, swirling around me like a tempest, a whirlwind of sorrow and rage. I could hear her cries, the pain of her existence echoing in my ears as if she were right beside me. Suddenly, the mirror rattled violently, and the surface rippled like water, distorting the reflection of the room around me. I was drawn to it, unable to look away as the woman's face materialized once more, this time filled with rage and despair that seemed to seep into my very soul. "Why have you come here?" she screamed, her voice a cacophony of anguish that pierced the air. "You must leave. You don't belong here." I pleaded with her, telling her I wanted to help, that I understood her suffering, that I could not bear to see her trapped in this torment. But as I spoke, the shadows grew darker, swirling around me with a malevolence that sent a jolt of fear through my body. I felt myself being pulled toward the mirror, as if it were a portal to another realm, a gateway to the darkness that had ensnared her. Panic surged through me, and I fought against the invisible force, desperate to break free from its grasp. In that moment of struggle, I remembered the journal's final entry, where Margaret had mentioned a fire that had consumed the house long ago, a devastating blaze that had claimed her life and the lives of others. "You need to let go," I shouted, hoping my words would reach her, to break through the despair that held her captive. "You don't have to suffer anymore. You can be free." The shadows screamed in fury, and I felt the heat of the flames licking at my heels, a reminder of the destruction that had once ravaged this place. With one final surge of determination, I threw the journal into the mirror, and it shattered like glass, releasing a blinding light that illuminated the darkness around me. The room erupted in chaos as the shadows writhed and twisted, and I felt myself being propelled backward, away from the mirror's grasp, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. I stumbled out of the basement, gasping for breath, and ran through the house, the walls shaking as if the very foundation was coming apart under the weight of the chaos. I burst through the front door and into the night, the cool air hitting my face like a wave of relief that washed away the remnants of fear. Behind me, I could hear the house groaning and cracking, the whispers fading into silence as if the very essence of the place was being extinguished. As I stood there, watching the house on Willow Street, I saw flames erupting from the windows, consuming the darkness that had taken root within. The fire danced against the night sky, illuminating the shadows that had haunted me for so long, casting flickering light on the memories of despair that had lingered in the air. I felt a sense of liberation wash over me, knowing that the house would no longer hold its secrets, that Margaret's suffering had finally come to an end, her spirit free from the chains that bound her. The next day, as the sun rose over the charred remains of the house, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a burden I hadn't realized I had been carrying. I had escaped the darkness, but the memory of that night would forever linger in my mind, etched into my consciousness like a scar. I knew that some places were better left undisturbed, their secrets buried beneath the ashes of the past, and I vowed to remember the lessons I had learned. As I turned to leave Willow Street behind, I promised myself that I would never again be drawn to the allure of the unknown, for some stories are best left untold, hidden away in the shadows where they belong. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. For the past 17 years, I've dedicated my life to understanding the intricacies of the human psyche, particularly the delicate and often vulnerable minds of children. As a master's student in psychology, I believed I had discovered a unique way to wield the transformative power of psychedelics and hypnosis, aiming to heal the deep wounds of trauma that so many young souls carried within them. I resided in a quiet neighborhood, where I became a familiar face to the children and their parents, who placed their trust in me with their most precious treasures. Little did they know, I was conducting experiments that would ultimately lead me down a dark and treacherous path, one that would change everything I thought I knew about healing and ethics. It all began with a chance encounter with a child named Lily. She was a bright and spirited girl with an infectious laugh that could light up the gloomiest of days, but behind her cheerful demeanor lay a shadow of sadness that I couldn't ignore. Her parents had recently gone through a painful divorce, and the impact on her psyche was evident in the way she interacted with the world around her. I approached her one afternoon while she played alone in her backyard, surrounded by the remnants of childhood joy. After some gentle coaxing, I convinced her to join me for a fun game that involved deep relaxation and imaginative exploration. I told her it was a way to help her feel better, to escape the heaviness that had settled over her young heart. As I guided her into a hypnotic state, I felt a rush of excitement and anticipation. The first time I successfully hypnotized a child, it was like opening a door to a hidden world filled with possibilities. I could see the potential for healing, for transformation, and I was eager to explore it further. With each session, I experimented with different techniques, introducing mild psychedelics to enhance the experience and deepen the therapeutic journey. I believe wholeheartedly that I was helping them confront their fears, their pain, and ultimately find peace within themselves. However, as I delved deeper into this uncharted territory, I began to lose sight of the ethical boundaries that should have guided my work. The line between therapy and manipulation blurred in ways that I had never anticipated. I would often find myself lost in the labyrinth of their minds, exploring their darkest corners while trying to illuminate the path to healing. The more I experimented, the more I craved the intoxicating power I felt when I was in control of their subconscious. It was a heady feeling, one that intoxicated me and drove me to push the limits of what I considered acceptable. One fateful evening, I prepared for a session with Lily that would change everything. I had recently acquired a stronger psychedelic substance and was eager to test its effects, convinced that it would unlock deeper layers of her psyche. I meticulously set up my room with soft lighting and calming music, creating an atmosphere I thought would be conducive to healing and comfort. As Lily entered, I noticed a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a moment of hesitation that I dismissed. I was the expert, after all, and I believed I knew what was best for her. I guided her into a trance, my voice soothing and steady, weaving a tapestry of calm around her. As I deepened her state, I introduced the substance, believing it would unlock profound insights and healing. But something went horribly wrong. As I watched her face contort with fear, I felt a surge of panic rise within me. I tried to pull her back, to bring her out of the darkness I had inadvertently thrown her into, but it was too late. The room spun around me, and I stumbled backward, hitting my head against the edge of a table. Blood poured from the wound, blurring my vision and clouding my mind. In that moment of chaos, I felt the boundaries of reality dissolve into a swirling abyss. I was no longer the one in control. I was merely a spectator in a nightmare of my own making. The voices of the children I had hypnotized echoed in my mind, their fears and traumas intertwining with my own. I could hear their cries, their desperate pleas for help, but I was powerless to respond. The very techniques I had used to help them now turned against me, dragging me into a dark abyss from which there seemed to be no escape. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself spiraling deeper into madness. I could no longer distinguish between my thoughts and the haunting echoes of the children's pain. I became a prisoner of my own mind, tormented by the faces of those I had tried to save. Lily's laughter, once a source of joy, had transformed into a chilling reminder of my failure, and I was consumed by an overwhelming guilt that clawed at my insides. I attempted to reach out for help, but the damage was done, and the wounds I had inflicted were too deep to heal. The whispers in my mind grew louder, drowning out any rational thought that dared to surface. I became a recluse, avoiding contact with the outside world, terrified of what I had unleashed. The children I had once seen as subjects of my experiments became my tormentors, their trauma intertwining with my own in a grotesque dance of despair. One night, I was jolted awake by a vision of Lily standing at the foot of my bed, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. I could see the remnants of our last session etched on her face, the terror I had inadvertently instilled in her now manifesting in her expression. I reached out to her, desperate to apologize and make amends, but she faded away like a wisp of smoke, leaving me alone in my darkness. The weight of my actions crashed down on me, and I realized I had not only harmed her but had opened the door to something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. In my desperation to atone for my mistakes, I returned to the room where it all began. The walls were lined with the remnants of my experiments, notes, recordings, and remnants of the substances I had used, all bearing witness to my descent into madness. As I sifted through the chaos, I felt a compulsion to confront the darkness I had unleashed upon myself and the children I had wronged. I set up a makeshift altar, hoping to appease the spirits of those children whose trust one had so callously betrayed. But the more I tried to atone, the more the darkness consumed me, enveloping me in its suffocating grasp. I began to see haunting visions of the children, their faces twisted in pain and anger, their eyes filled with betrayal. They surrounded me, their whispers growing into a deafening cacophony of despair. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own creation, and there was no escape from the torment I had unleashed. As the days turned into a blur of terror and anguish, I realized that I had crossed an irreversible line. The boundaries of psychology had shattered, leaving only chaos and suffering in their wake. I had become a cautionary tale, a living warning of the dangers of playing God with the minds of the vulnerable and innocent. In my final moments, I understood the true cost of my ambition and the hubris that had driven me to this point. The very techniques I had once believed would heal had instead become instruments of destruction, tearing apart the very fabric of my existence. I felt the weight of the children's pain pressing down on me, suffocating me, and as I succumbed to the darkness that enveloped me, I whispered their names into the void, hoping against hope that they would find it in their hearts to forgive me. The abyss of the mind had claimed me, and as I faded into oblivion, I could only hope that my story would serve as a cautionary reminder of the ethical responsibilities that come with the pursuit of knowledge and understanding. The line between healing and harm is a fragile one, and in my misguided quest to help, I had lost everything I held dear. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. From the earliest memories I possess, my sister's teddy bear has been a constant companion by my side. This fluffy brown bear, with its soft fur and eyes that gleam with an unsettling dark light, has always seemed to possess an awareness, as if it is perpetually watching me. Each night, as darkness envelopes the room and I settle into bed, an inexplicable fear washes over me, flooding my mind with anxiety. As the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, I begin to feel an overwhelming sense that this bear is not merely a toy. Rather, it seems to harbor some unspeakable secret, as if countless unresolved mysteries lay hidden behind its innocent facade. One particular night stands out in my memory when I woke up to find the bear much closer to me than it had been before. I distinctly recall placing it on the other side of the bed, far away from where I slept, but when I opened my eyes, I was startled to see its face almost right next to mine. Those black eyes sparkled ominously under the dim glow of the night light, sending chills racing down my spine. I attempted to convince myself that it was merely a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind, but every time I closed my eyes, that uneasy feeling only intensified, as if the bear were lurking in the shadows, patiently waiting for me to let my guard down. In a desperate attempt to reclaim my sense of safety, I began to avoid the bear altogether, trying to shove it into a corner of the room where I wouldn't have to see it. However, no matter what I did, it would always find its way back to my bedside when I woke up in the morning. It was as though it possessed a mind of its own, a sentience that allowed it to know my fears and insecurities. My sister, oblivious to my distress, simply laughed off my concerns, saying, "It's your guardian, don't be afraid." But deep down, I knew that this was not the kind of guardian I wanted or needed. Its presence felt suffocating, as if it occupied far too much space in my life, casting a long shadow over my thoughts and emotions. As time went on, that fear only grew more pronounced and harder to ignore. I began to experience vivid nightmares, dreams in which that very teddy bear would walk towards me in the dark, whispering incomprehensible words that sent shivers down my spine. Each time I woke up, I found myself drenched in sweat, my heart racing as if I had been running from something terrifying. It felt as though that fear had seeped from my dreams into the very fabric of my reality. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I could no longer endure the torment that this bear represented in my life. In a fit of desperation, I decided to burn it. That night, I lit a bonfire in the backyard, the flames dancing and crackling in the stillness of the evening. I tossed that bear into the fire, watching it twist and melt away, feeling a wave of relief wash over me as if I had finally broken free from an invisible bondage that had held me captive for far too long. However, the relief I felt was fleeting and did not last long. Just a few months later, my family and I moved to a new city, and I hoped that this fresh start would bring a sense of peace. Just when I thought everything would finally begin anew, I stumbled upon a nearly identical teddy bear at a thrift store. Its eyes still sparkled with that same unsettling dark gleam, as if beckoning me to take it home. A wave of unease washed over me, but I found myself unable to resist the pull of the bear's charm, so I ended up buying it. Once I returned home, I tried to convince myself that this bear would not bring fear into my life, but there was always a nagging sense of dread lurking in the back of my mind, refusing to let go. Every night, that unease would rise up again, clawing at my insides. I placed the bear on my desk, attempting to avoid eye contact with it, hoping that by ignoring it, I could somehow diminish its power over me. Yet, when the house fell silent at night, I could hear faint noises coming from the kitchen, like someone was rummaging through the cabinets. My heart would race, and I would think back to the bear I had burned. Had it really come back to haunt me? I started to question my sanity, wondering if I was simply overthinking things, but that feeling of dread only intensified, as if I were battling an unseen force that refused to let me go. Days turned into weeks, and soon my nightmares returned with a vengeance. In my dreams, that bear would stand ominously by my bed, softly calling my name in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. Every time I tried to run away, its arms would reach out and grab me tightly, holding me in place. I struggled in my dreams, desperately trying to escape, but I could never break free. When I finally woke up, my palms were clammy with sweat, and I was filled with a paralyzing fear. Each night, my anxiety would spike, as if I were on the brink of being engulfed by that bear's shadow at any moment. In a fit of desperation, I began searching online for stories about teddy bears, hoping to find some solace in the shared experiences of others. I came across numerous legends about cursed toys, tales of objects that absorbed their owners' emotions and became sentient, responding to their owners in various ways during the night. Panic surged through me. Could this bear truly possess a soul? The more I pondered this possibility, the more frightened I became, feeling as though it was watching my every move, waiting for me to show weakness again. Determined to rid myself of this torment once more, I decided to try getting rid of it again. This time, I carefully placed it in a box, sealed it up tightly, and planned to donate it to a local charity. But when I opened the box to leave, I was horrified to find the bear back at my bedside, as if it had never left. I was on the verge of breaking down. Was I ever going to escape its grasp? I felt utterly helpless, overwhelmed with despair, as if I were trapped in an endless nightmare that would never release me. Just when I had hit my lowest point, a friend came to visit. She noticed my pale face and asked me what was troubling me. I poured my heart out to her, telling her everything that had happened, but she simply laughed and said, "You're being too sensitive. It's just a toy. Don't think too much about it." After saying that, she picked up the bear and sat down on the couch with it. In that moment, a wave of fear surged through me, as if the bear had awakened in her embrace, becoming even more alive than before. My instinct screamed that this was not just a simple toy. It was something that harbored dark power and sinister intentions. That night, I was jolted awake again by nightmares that felt more vivid and real than ever before. This time, the bear wasn't standing still. It was moving around the room, searching for me with an unsettling determination. Its black eyes gleamed with an eerie light, as if mocking my helplessness and fear. When I woke up, my heart raced uncontrollably, and I felt as though I was about to crack under the pressure of my own terror. Each night, my anxiety grew, as if the entire room was filled with its shadow, suffocating me. As the days passed, I became increasingly anxious, unable to find solace in sleep. Every time I heard a noise from the kitchen, fear would rise in my chest like a tidal wave. I began to question my sanity, wondering if I was losing my mind or if this bear was truly cursed in some way. My friend started to grow concerned about my state of mind and urged me to seek help from a therapist. Her concern brought a flicker of warmth to my heart, but the fear that consumed me still refused to dissipate. During one of my sessions with the therapist, we engaged in a deep conversation about my fears. The doctor explained that fear often stems from unresolved issues deep within us, buried beneath layers of denial and avoidance. It struck me then that my fear of that bear was actually an escape from my past experiences, a manifestation of my unresolved feelings. I decided that I needed to confront my fear head-on and attempt to communicate with the bear. I began to reflect on my emotions, trying to find the root of my fear, understanding that the bear wasn't my enemy but rather a part of my inner self that I needed to acknowledge. One night, I gathered my courage, sitting on the edge of my bed and facing the bear. I started to express my feelings aloud, telling it about my fear and the unresolved pain I carried inside. Surprisingly, as I spoke, I felt a weight lifting off my heart, as if that oppressive feeling was slowly dissipating into the air. The bear's presence transformed in my mind from a symbol of terror to a repository of my emotions, a vessel for my fears and insecurities. A few days later, I noticed a significant change in my dreams. The bear was no longer a terrifying presence. Instead, it became warm and comforting, as if it were there to soothe my troubled soul. The nighttime noises from the kitchen gradually faded into silence, and I began to sleep peacefully for the first time in what felt like ages. Although I knew the bear was still by my side, I no longer felt fear. Instead, I began to see it as a companion, a friend who had been with me through my darkest moments. It became an irreplaceable part of my life, helping me navigate through countless lonely nights and providing a sense of comfort I had longed for. In the end, I made the decision to keep this teddy bear in my life. It was no longer a shadow lurking in my heart, but rather a part of my growth and healing process. I learned to face my fears and accept my past experiences, no matter how painful they may have been. Even though I understood that some shadows might never fully disappear, I also realized that only by bravely confronting them could I find the inner peace I had been searching for. That bear, once a source of terror, had taught me how to coexist with my fears, ultimately becoming an indispensable companion in my life, guiding me through the complexities of my emotions and the challenges of my journey. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time. Stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.
Driving at night possesses an almost ethereal quality, a mesmerizing rhythm where you become one with the road stretching infinitely before you. The veil of night has this peculiar ability to amplify both solitude and serenity. On a particular evening, I found myself enveloped by such enchanting darkness, my car slicing through the inky abyss as the tires hummed a song to the vast emptiness around me. For hours, I had been on this relentless journey, tasked with delivering goods to small, elusive towns that seemed to appear and vanish into the night like fleeting ghosts. Weariness had begun its assault, clawing at my alertness, and my spirits lifted ever so slightly when a distant, neon glow, a fast food emblem known all too well, shimmered like a beacon of salvation. I approached this lone McDonald's nestled awkwardly between vast expanses of nothingness, feeling an inexplicable sense of relief as I entered the ghostly parking lot. The structure was ablaze with artificial light, an almost defiant stand against the encroaching shadows that loomed like ominous spectators. Yet, this inviting glow contrasted sharply with the jarring sight of an entirely vacant parking area, devoid of any other vehicles or signs of life. A palpable chill crept through my skin, defying the warm air whirring from the car's heater, turning what should have been an innocent rest stop into an unnerving enigma. As my fatigue threatened to claim victory over my senses, hunger and curiosity joined forces to spur me onward. Surely, a brief respite, a warm coffee, and a quick meal would invigorate me, ensuring I could navigate the remainder of my lengthy route. I approached the drive-thru, tires clicking rhythmically on the gravel path, as a cheerful yet incongruously eerie tune floated through the air, ill-suited for the moment. The intercom crackled to life, a disembodied voice breaking the silence with hollow enthusiasm. "Welcome to McDonald's. May I take your order?" The voice, overly cheerful and impossibly rehearsed, struck a dissonant chord within me, seeding discomfort that settled uneasily in my gut. Casting aside my misgivings, I selected a simple order from memory, a black coffee and a burger. The intercom clicked again, the voice offering assurances that my order would be promptly prepared. Turning the corner to the pickup window, I reached for my wallet, grateful the promise of sustenance and caffeine would soon fuel the night's journey ahead. As the window slid open silently, my greeting stuck, a whisper caught in the cold grip of my throat. What I saw next turned my blood to ice. The individual standing before me was an apparition of disarray, as if conjured from a nightmare. Their uniform was in utter disarray, and my mind grappled with the horrific reality before me. It was not the chaotic state of their clothing that anchored me in terror, it was the vivid, sinister crimson splashed across them, head to toe, like a grotesque work of art. For an interminable moment, our eyes met. Mine were wide, filled with mounting horror, while theirs were unnervingly void, as if peering into the very depths of my soul. Overwhelmed by the chilling grip of fear threatening to paralyze me, I summoned every ounce of willpower to maintain a semblance of composure. With trembling hands, I accepted the bag and cup extended toward me, my gaze unwillingly fixating on the red spots marring the bag's innocent brown hue. Adrenaline surged, an urgent plea from my instincts to escape this surreal and terrifying encounter. Suddenly, I was accelerating away, the tires protesting under the sudden demand as I forced the pedal down further than intended. My mind spun wildly, questioning the reality of what I had witnessed. Was it truly real, or had fatigue orchestrated a vivid, macabre illusion? The rational section of my mind fought for dominance, reasoning it must have been an ill-conceived prank, a juvenile attempt at horror-themed humor by the establishment. But beneath this logic, raw instincts screamed an unmistakable warning. Something was profoundly and disturbingly wrong. I resisted the irrational urge to peer over my shoulder, lest the haunting image lingered in my sight. My grip tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles blanching as the diner diminished rapidly in my rearview mirror. Reduced to a mere glint of light against the never-ending tapestry of the night, I finally dared to release the breath I had unwittingly held, escaping as a shuddering exhale. Upon reaching the refuge of another rest stop, a welcome haven bustling with weary travelers and refreshingly devoid of insidious mysteries, I disposed of the bag without ever daring to peek inside. The mere thought of what might have tainted the food stirred a visceral, gut-clenching unease, nausea spawned not by hunger but rooted in revulsion. There was no solace in the silence for the remainder of my journey. A shadow of unease draped over me, thick like fog under a hidden moon. The external darkness seemed densely packed, the isolation almost suffocating. Every shadow sharpened to sinister clarity, The whisper of wind against the car's surfaces morphed into cautionary murmurings, a language bereft of comprehension yet layered with silent warnings. Dawn's first fragile tendrils scorched the horizon by the time I finally reached my intended destination. Standing on the precipice of morning, a soft glow erasing the darkness, I began to question the veracity of my recollections. Had it been nothing more than a fevered vision, a narrative spun from a weary mind? Or had I, in truth, ventured into the realm of the sinister, faced with an inexplicably chilling reality in that solitary, illuminated diner? Rationality attempted its gentle counsel, but a primal whisper persisted deep within, a behest to remain vigilant. As I recount the specters of that shadowed night, a part of me cannot help but ponder if the diner still stands solitary and silent on that forgotten stretch of desolate highway, a beacon for other unsuspecting travelers to encounter. My fervent hope remains that those who come across its path heed their instincts, wisely choosing to drive on unperturbed, leaving the haunting unknown to slumber undisturbed. And as I sift through the vivid tapestry of memories, the haunting unease remains imprinted, whispering that I narrowly evaded something far darker, far more sinister than I have the courage to truly acknowledge. The night had a way of wrapping its tendrils around my thoughts, each mile stretching out like a never-ending thread in a tapestry of uncertainty. The rhythmic thrum of the engine was a constant companion, yet it did little to drown out the questions that echoed in my mind. Had I truly seen what I thought I had, or was it merely a trick of the light, a figment conjured by exhaustion and the haze of the night? As I drove on, the landscape around me began to blur, the edges of reality softening under the weight of doubt. The road seemed to stretch on forever, a ribbon of asphalt winding through an ocean of darkness. Each passing mile marker felt like a heartbeat, a steady reminder of the distance I had yet to cover. And yet, the memory of the diner lingered, a ghostly presence that refused to be banished by the dawn. I found myself replaying the encounter in my mind, dissecting each moment with the precision of a surgeon. The server's vacant eyes, the crimson stains that marred their uniform, the unnerving cheerfulness of the voice over the intercom, all of it played out in an endless loop, a film reel of horror that refused to let me go. I searched for answers in the shadows, hoping to find some semblance of logic to cling to, yet all I found was an ever-deepening pit of unease. Even as the first light of day began to paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, the sense of foreboding remained. It clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder of the night I had left behind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something far beyond my understanding, a glimpse into a world where reality and nightmare intertwined. As I reached my final destination, the familiarity of the surroundings did little to ease the tension that had taken root within me. The streets were alive with the bustle of morning routines, the world awakening to a new day, yet I felt like an outsider, a traveler who had ventured too far into the unknown. The events of the night weighed heavily on my mind, a burden I couldn't easily cast aside. In the days that followed, I found myself haunted by the memory of the diner. It seeped into my thoughts at the most unexpected moments, a specter that refused to be forgotten. I couldn't help but wonder if others had experienced the same unsettling encounter, if the diner stood as a silent sentinel, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to cross its path. And so, I remained vigilant, my senses attuned to the whispers of the night. The road calls to me still, a siren song that beckons me to explore its depths once more. But I tread carefully, ever aware of the shadows that lurk just beyond the reach of the headlights. For I know that within the darkness lies a world of mystery and danger, a place where the boundaries of reality blur and the unknown waits patiently for those who dare to seek it out. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Working as a guide at the mining museum nestled in the heart of British Columbia seemed an easy enough job, straightforward and with little complexity. My responsibility was to lead intrigued visitors through the dimly lit, intricate tunnels, spaces where the walls themselves seemed to hold the echoes of countless tales about the miners who once courageously faced the challenges of these vast subterranean mazes. In 2008, I found myself a few months into this role, with each day blending seamlessly into the next, marked by routine and familiar faces of enthusiastic visitors. That is, until one particular evening, a night so vivid in its terror, it etched itself into my memory forever. The chilling experience from that night resurfaces unexpectedly, stealing into quiet moments and haunting my dreams long after darkness falls. The day had unfolded quietly, only marked by the presence of eager groups keen on uncovering the rich mining history that this unique region carried within its depths. As the sun began its descent beyond the distant mountains, casting long and foreboding shadows across the entrance of the museum, I prepared myself with a steady breath for the final tour of the fading day. Once the last of the visitors had trickled out, leaving behind only the echoes of their footsteps, I was left alone with the duty of ensuring that each corner of the expansive exhibit was just right before I locked the heavy, protective doors for the night to come. The tunnels, with their cool, dank air, were like a second home to me as I moved through them. Each step I took echoed hauntingly off the uneven stone walls, creating a symphony of sound that was both familiar and eerie. As I approached the deepest recess of the mine, a peculiar chill began to trace a path down my spine. It was a sensation that seemed out of place, foreign, and invasive. Despite this prickling discomfort, I attributed it merely to the exhaustion of the day's work. Determined not to be swayed by fatigue, I continued my checks, venturing deeper into the stillness that enveloped the tunnels. That's when it began. At first, it was just a faint sound, almost drowned out by the ambient rustling of the tunnels. A whisper, so softly spoken it almost didn't register. My entire body froze, every muscle taut as I strained to listen more intently, hoping to catch the sound once more amidst the silence. Was it the wind, a simple trick of the underground breezes, or something else, more sinister? The voice was just barely audible, and yet undeniably human in nature, repeating what I swore sounded like "help us." My heart accelerated, thudding violently within my chest as I peered down the path, my eyes meeting only the daunting emptiness stretching before me. I attempted to rationalize, convincing myself it must be my mind playing tricks after a tiring day. Yet as I turned to leave, the whispers grew stronger, more urgent, almost desperate. Terror shot through my entire being, compelling me into a full sprint, fueled by an overwhelming desire to escape whatever unseen presence may have dwelled within those dark, forgotten corridors. The narrow beam of my flashlight cut slices through the dense darkness as I ran, illuminating horrifying forms that brought me to a jarring stop. There, strewn about the hard earth floor, lay spectral figures garbed in the attire of miners from eras long since past, their faces unnaturally pale, life having long departed. I stood paralyzed, only able to blink. In that fleeting moment, they disappeared, leaving the tunnel as empty as it had seemed before, though my heart knew differently. Stumbling backwards, disoriented by a heady mix of disbelief and sheer horror, my mind was a maelstrom of fear. The whispers ceased suddenly, giving way to a silence so profound and absolute it was suffocating. I dashed towards the exit, the pounding of my heart an unrelenting drum in my ears, and secured the doors with shaking hands, desperate to leave behind the weight of what I had just experienced. That night, the solace of sleep remained elusive. Visions of the miners swarmed my thoughts relentlessly, their spectral visages woven into every dream, their whispers threading into the stillness of my room like a sinister lullaby. With the break of dawn arrived a growing urge that I could not ignore, a compelling need to delve into the history of the mine, to piece together the puzzle of that night. What I uncovered sent icy prickles over my skin. 18 miners had indeed met their tragic fate during the very construction of these tunnels, victims of a disastrous accident that left them entombed in perpetual darkness. Realizing that I might have encountered their lingering spirits left me with a complex mesh of dread and a profound sympathy. From that unforgettable night onwards, the mere thought of braving the tunnels alone became unthinkable. The whispers and brief visions were persistent reminders of those restless souls, seemingly trapped and yearning for recognition within those stone walls. I took their tale to heart, weaving it into the stories I shared with our visitors, hoping to honor their existence and ensure they did not vanish into the shadows of forgotten history. Although many years now stand between me and that ominous encounter, the experience remains a powerful presence in my life, etched with incredible clarity upon my consciousness. The whispers drifting from the depths of the earth and the transient sight of those poor, lost miners remain an enduring testament to the past's ghostly grip. They act as a poignant reminder that some stories refuse to be silenced, their echoes ever present and resonating through the winds of time. The work of guiding visitors through the mining museum in British Columbia was never supposed to be fraught with fear or mystery. It was a job that was meant to be simple, a straightforward duty of escorting guests through the museum's dimly lit tunnels. These tunnels were rich with history, their walls seemingly alive with the stories of miners who had once braved the perilous depths. In 2008, I found myself comfortably settled into this role, each day passing in a routine that was both predictable and fulfilling. Visitors came and went, their faces filled with curiosity and eagerness to learn about the mining heritage of the region. But everything changed one night, a night so terrifying that it remains etched in my memory, resurfacing in moments of quiet and haunting my dreams. The day had been like any other, filled with groups of visitors eager to delve into the mining history that this unique region had to offer. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the museum's entrance, I prepared for the final tour. Once the last visitors had left, I was left with the task of ensuring that everything was in order before locking up for the night. The tunnels, with their cool, damp air, were familiar to me, and I moved through them with ease. Each step echoed off the stone walls, creating a sound that was both comforting and eerie. As I reached the deepest part of the mine, a chill ran down my spine, a sensation that was both foreign and unsettling. I attributed it to fatigue and continued my checks, moving deeper into the stillness of the tunnels. Then it happened. A faint sound, almost lost in the ambient noise of the tunnels, reached my ears. It was a whisper, so soft that it was almost imperceptible. I froze, every muscle tense as I listened intently, hoping to hear it again. Was it the wind, or something more sinister? The voice was barely audible, yet unmistakably human, repeating what I thought was "help us." My heart raced, pounding in my chest as I looked down the path, seeing only emptiness. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind after a long day. But as I turned to leave, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Fear surged through me, and I ran, desperate to escape whatever unseen presence was in the tunnels. My flashlight cut through the darkness as I ran, illuminating figures on the ground that stopped me in my tracks. There, on the floor, were ghostly figures dressed in old mining clothes, their faces pale and lifeless. I stood frozen, blinking, and in that instant, they vanished, leaving the tunnel empty. I stumbled back, my mind racing with disbelief and fear. The whispers stopped, replaced by a silence so deep it was suffocating. I ran to the exit, my heart pounding, and locked the doors with trembling hands, eager to leave the experience behind. That night, sleep was elusive. The faces of the miners filled my thoughts, their whispers echoing in my room. With the dawn came an urge to understand what I had seen. I researched the mine's history, looking for answers to the mystery of that night. What I found was chilling. 18 miners had died during the construction of the tunnels, victims of a tragic accident. The realization that I might have encountered their spirits filled me with dread and empathy. From that night on, I refused to enter the tunnels alone. The whispers and visions were constant reminders of the restless souls within the stone walls, seeking recognition and peace. I shared their story with visitors, hoping to honor their memory and keep them from being forgotten. Though years have passed, the experience remains vivid in my mind. The whispers and the sight of the miners are a testament to the past's hold, a reminder that some stories are never truly silenced. They echo through time, a haunting presence that lingers on. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. On a chilly evening as summer's end loomed near, I found myself seated across from Sheriff Wilson in his dimly lit office, a room I had visited far too frequently over the past few weeks. Each visit seemed to pile new layers onto an already palpable sense of unease that settled over me like an unwelcome fog. The tension in the room perfectly mirrored the anxiety that had settled over our little coastal town, an anxiety that seeped into every conversation, every glance exchanged between the townspeople. It wasn't just the chill in the air hinting at the approaching autumn that sent shivers down spines. It was the recent wave of strange and sudden disappearances casting an unforgiving, dark shadow over our otherwise vibrant community. This shadow had threatened to swallow us whole, wrapping everyone in a state of perpetual anxiety, steeping our daily lives in fear for what unknown horror might happen next. I had come to this dim office to meet with Wilson, hoping to shed light on the grim events we could not seem to escape, yearning for even the smallest insight he might have uncovered, or at the very least, to lighten the heavy, burdensome worry that had clung to us all, hoping for a shared understanding of the dread that had taken root in our hearts. The silence in the room was oppressive, as though swallowed up by the dense fog of uncertainty and fear. This silence was only broken intermittently by the rhythmic, almost hypnotic crashing of waves upon the distant shore outside, a relentless, haunting reminder of the vast, enigmatic ocean lying just beyond our sight, its promise of secrets untold overshadowed by its recent role as a harbinger of likely doom. It was within this tension-filled space that Wilson leaned over his cluttered, paper-strewn desk, shadows dancing ominously across his face beneath the brim of his well-worn and age-weathered hat. The look in his eyes was a mix of exhaustion and unyielding determination, and his voice, thick with the weight of the past weeks and the urgency of our current moment, cut through the silence like a knife. 2 kids vanished last night, right around the old pier, he began, his voice heavy with sorrow and urgency. Each word was carefully measured, yet laced with an intensity that reflected the severity of these incidents. People around town are saying it was a creature, something monstrous, something that rose up from the depths and took them. As Wilson shared this deeply unsettling news, a shiver, sharp and icy, ran up my spine, igniting vivid memories I had long, tirelessly struggled to bury. My mind was dragged, almost against my will, back to that fateful day so many years ago, when my own relentless curiosity led me too deep into the ocean's relentless embrace. What should have been an exploration filled with wonder, with the endless marvels of the underwater realm, had turned abruptly, without warning, into a scene of abject horror. I was left indelibly marked and incomplete, my hand lost forever to the ocean's depths. Since that day, an ever-present fear has lingered stubbornly in the deepest recesses of my mind, an acute, almost paralyzing fear of the transformations that can occur beneath the waves, those terrifying, grotesque changes that signify the loss of one's humanity to the ocean's cruel, avaricious ways. Wilson pressed on, though it was clear his voice carried a slight tremor he could not entirely conceal. Rumors have begun to circulate about ancient legends of sea creatures, sinister and enticing, lying in wait, ready to ensnare the unwary and unsuspecting. Yet, as his words reached me, my attention rapidly pivoted to something deeply unsettling, something unexpected. His hands, once steady and reliable symbols of strength, now twitched uncontrollably with an unnatural, alarming vigor. His skin began to change, assuming a gleaming, unnatural sheen, as though some alien horror was clawing its way to the surface, desperate to break free. My heart thudded violently in my chest, a chaotic drumming conveying nothing but mounting panic as realization struck me. I was witnessing the beginning of a dreaded transformation, one I had feared more than anything, manifesting right before my eyes. Horrifyingly, it was consuming Wilson, not me. "Wilson, what's happening to you?" I shouted, my voice edged heavily with panic as I bolted upright from my chair, a wave of alarm and dread coursing through me. His eyes, wide and infused with palpable dread, sought mine almost desperately. I can't explain it," he stammered, struggling to get words out, each syllable warped by distortion, panic woven through every broken sound. "It feels like some force is trying to take over." My gaze remained transfixed as Wilson's form began to twist grotesquely, contorting with each passing, agonizing moment into something monstrous and alien. His skin blackened and seemed to crack apart, revealing a hideous, abhorrent creature lurking beneath. It was as though the nightmarish tales of sea demons, whispered by superstitious sailors and old lore, had sprung chillingly to life right before my eyes, becoming an embodiment of my worst fears as I stood, immobilized, paralyzed by horror, staring into an abyss I had desperately hoped would remain a mere fabrication of legend. Driven by sheer horror and crippling desperation, I reached for the weapon I had carried ever since my own terrifying encounter with the depths, a heavy, unyielding club ominously named the Skull Smasher. Fueled by an intense, volatile concoction of fear and seething anger, I swung it with all the force my body could muster at the monstrosity that had once been my friend, Wilson. The impact was both fierce and sickening, a scene of brutal violence as it splattered the room with viscous, black blood. The creature emitted an unbearable, agonizing shriek, a sound that seemed to pierce the very air, before collapsing into a grotesque, formless heap on the floor. I stood there, chest heaving with exhaustion and disbelief, overwhelmed and shocked by what I had just done, the grim, inescapable reality bearing down on me in relentless, suffocating waves. Silence reclaimed the room once more, interrupted only by the sound of my ragged, uneven breaths. I glanced down at the misshapen remnants of what had once been a man I held as a confidant and ally in troubled times. A tempest of anger and revulsion surged within me, not directed at the broken monstrosity he had become, but at the ancient, insidious call of the sea itself, a force that seemed hell-bent on bending us, forcing us to its terrifying will. "I absolutely despise mermaids," I muttered vehemently through clenched teeth, my voice echoing eerily in the room's suffocating stillness. Though my words felt like a betrayal of the majestic beauty the ocean once held for me, they were nonetheless the undeniable truth of my haunted, shattered heart. And thus, yet again, I find myself entrapped by the shadows lurking beneath the ocean's depths, painfully aware that the terror below seeks to claim us, to twist and transform our very essence into its dark, nightmarish image. Yet, I refuse to face this sinister fate alone. Armed with the Skull Smasher, I stand resolute and unwavering, ready to battle against whatever unspeakable horrors the unforgiving sea may choose to unleash, ever prepared to hold my ground firmly against its relentless, dark tide, prepared to fight until my very last breath. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. Living in the city has never been a walk in the park, especially when you're trying to make ends meet as a butcher. The rent is sky high, and the daily grind just keeps getting tougher. The constant hustle and bustle of urban life, the relentless noise, and the pressure to keep up with expenses have always been challenging. Every day feels like a marathon, with no finish line in sight. The bills pile up, the demands never cease, and it feels like I'm constantly treading water, just trying to stay afloat. The struggle to balance work and personal life is exhausting, and the weight of responsibilities is like a never-ending burden on my shoulders. The city, with its towering buildings and endless streams of people, never seems to sleep, and neither do I. My life has become a series of routines, each day blending into the next, with little time to pause and breathe. But lately, It's not just the financial pressure that's been weighing on me. My loyal dog, Max, has been acting strangely, and I can't shake the feeling that something's terribly wrong. It's as if an invisible cloud has settled over our lives, casting a shadow that grows longer each day. This sense of unease has become a constant companion, lurking in the corners of my mind, making it difficult to focus on anything else. The city that once felt like a place of opportunity now feels like a labyrinth of stress and uncertainty. Max used to be full of energy, always wagging his tail and ready for a walk. He was my constant companion, always eager to play or snuggle after a long day at the shop. His enthusiasm was infectious, a bright spot in the otherwise monotonous routine of my life. But over the past few weeks, his behavior has changed. He's restless, prowling around the apartment as if searching for something. His appetite has grown insatiable, yet his body grows thinner by the day. I've taken him to the vet, but they find nothing physically wrong. It's like he's being haunted by something I can't see. His once bright eyes now seem clouded with worry, and his playful bark has turned into a low, anxious whine. The transformation is heartbreaking, and I feel helpless, unable to alleviate his distress. His condition only adds to my anxiety, as I struggle to understand what could be causing his distress. I watch him wander the apartment, his movements erratic and his demeanor troubled, and I can't help but feel that we're both trapped in a situation beyond our control. At first, I thought it was just city stress getting to both of us. The constant noise, the cramped living space, and the never-ending hustle can wear anyone down. The blaring horns, the chatter of neighbors, and the ceaseless activity outside our window have become a backdrop to our lives, an ever-present reminder of the chaos that surrounds us. But then, I started noticing other things. Food disappearing from the pantry, strange noises in the night, and the unsettling feeling that we were not alone. My thoughts turned towards the landlord, a shifty character who always seemed too eager to let himself into the apartment for inspections. Was he messing with us, trying to drive us out so he could hike the rent even higher? The idea gnawed at me, adding to my growing sense of unease and suspicion. I began to question every creak, every unexplained movement, wondering if there was a more sinister motive behind it all. The paranoia grew, making it difficult to relax in my own home. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow more ominous, as if the very walls were conspiring against us. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I installed a pet camera in the living room, hoping to catch the landlord in the act. I was prepared to confront him with evidence, to put an end to this unsettling mystery. The thought of finally having proof, of being able to call him out, was both empowering and frightening. What I discovered was far more disturbing than I could have imagined. The footage revealed a creature, unlike anything I had ever seen, creeping out from the shadows. It was small at first, barely noticeable, but over the days, it grew larger, more daring. It moved with an unsettling grace, its eyes glinting with a malevolent intelligence as it rifled through our food stores. Its presence was both mesmerizing and terrifying, a silent invader that seemed to defy explanation. The realization that we were not alone, that something otherworldly had invaded our sanctuary, sent chills down my spine. The discovery left me both terrified and fascinated, as I struggled to comprehend the reality of what I was witnessing. The creature's existence challenged everything I thought I knew about the world, leaving me in a state of disbelief and fear. My heart pounded as I watched the recordings. This creature was not just stealing our food, it was growing stronger, more confident. Max's strange behavior made sense now. He had sensed the intruder long before I did. But why was it here, and what did it want? The thought of confronting it sent shivers down my spine, but I knew I couldn't let it continue to terrorize us. The very walls of our home seemed to close in, the familiar surroundings now alien and threatening. The sense of security I once felt had been shattered, replaced by a growing fear that permeated every aspect of my life. The apartment, once a place of comfort, had become a prison, haunted by an unseen menace that refused to leave. The creature's presence was a constant reminder of our vulnerability, a specter that loomed over every moment of our lives. I tried everything to get rid of it, setting traps, sealing up every possible entry point, but nothing worked. The creature was relentless, and with each passing day, it seemed to grow bolder, its presence more oppressive. I could feel its eyes on me, even in broad daylight, a constant reminder of the unseen threat lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. The air in the apartment felt heavier, charged with an energy that was both foreign and frightening. It was as if the very atmosphere had turned against us, conspiring with the creature to drive us out. The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was inescapable, and it consumed my thoughts day and night. My attempts to reclaim our home felt futile, as if the creature was always one step ahead, anticipating my every move. The final straw came one night when I awoke to find Max standing at the bedroom door, growling low in his throat. I followed his gaze and saw it, the creature, standing in the hallway, larger than ever before, its eyes locked onto mine. In that moment, I knew we couldn't stay. This was no longer our home, it had become a hunting ground. The realization hit me like a cold wave, washing away any lingering doubts or hopes that we could coexist with this entity. The decision to leave was no longer a choice but a necessity, a means of survival. The fear that had gripped me was replaced by a determination to protect Max and myself, to escape the nightmare that had taken over our lives. The creature's presence was a threat I could no longer ignore, a danger that demanded immediate action. Packing up our lives was a blur of frantic energy. I left behind the city that had been my home for so long, driven by a primal need to protect myself and Max. We hit the road, searching for a new beginning far away from the whispers in the walls and the terror that had invaded our lives. The decision to leave was both heartbreaking and liberating, a necessary escape from a nightmare that had consumed us. As we drove away, the weight of the city lifted from my shoulders, replaced by a cautious optimism for what lay ahead. The open road stretched out before us, offering the promise of a fresh start, free from the fear that had held us captive. The journey was both a physical and emotional departure from the life we had known, a chance to redefine our existence away from the shadows that had haunted us. Now, as I look out over the open fields of our new home, I feel a sense of peace that had long eluded me. Max is slowly recovering, his spirit returning with each passing day. The memories of that creature still haunt me, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. But here, under the wide open sky, I feel hope. We've escaped the nightmare, and for the first time in a long time, I believe we're safe. The vastness of the landscape offers solace, a stark contrast to the suffocating confines of the city and the horrors we left behind. The open space, the fresh air, and the quietude provide a sanctuary for healing, a place where we can rebuild and find solace in the simple joys of life. The terror that once consumed us has been replaced by a sense of freedom and possibility, as we embrace the chance to start anew in this tranquil haven. The open fields and endless skies are a balm to my weary soul, offering a promise of renewal and peace that I had almost forgotten was possible. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away.